with a lot of health and wellness stuff in there. So we
Cool.
like to hit on all those things. We've been doing a lot of college coaches the past year and a half, crushing it with the cross country coaches with NCAA championships coming up this weekend.
Mm,
We also just recently had Rock Harrison on. So anyone
yeah.
that's covering the sport of wrestling or doing things to help grow the sport of wrestling, we try to reach out and make connections. And we know you're doing great stuff, and you're also a Jersey guy, so it's always cool when we get to make those connections and have conversations with some people we have some familiarity with. So we're
Cool.
stoked
Sounds
to
good to
have you
me.
on.
Yeah. Rock's a good dude. I've had him on my own pod months ago, and him and I have communicated. Actually, I finally met him in person back in March out in Kansas City. He's a really good dude.
Awesome. Yeah, he's tons of energy, and it's great to again have him on to talk about what he's got going on. And he's got a cool story about how he was trying to do some college officiating and they told him he
Yeah.
wasn't that great at it. And then next thing you know, he's standing next to JB covering the NCAs and doing
Yeah.
stuff
He's
like
the rule
that.
expert. He's the rules expert now, which is
Yeah,
wild
that's
considering that
awesome.
story.
Right on. All right, y'all. We are back. And tonight, like we do over here, Ary Bros, one night we're going on the cross country course. So shout out to Coach Chapman with the Wartburg Knights and wishing them the best of luck on Saturday at the national championships and all the coaches and athletes that have come on and represented their college and university. We wish them the best of luck at nationals, whether it's Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, or NAIA. So thank you to all of them for joining us. But tonight we're going belly to belly. We're back on the mat and we're talking with Nick Kosko. We're talking Jersey wrestling with the Jersey guy. So we're excited for that. But before we get too far into that, make sure you rate, review, and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on YouTube. Nick also has a YouTube channel, and he is over at Nick Kosko 55. So make sure you give him a follow and a subscribe, and let him know you found him on Ary Bros. But Nick is a seasoned broadcaster. He wears many hats in the world of sports media, national news desk writer for On, covering college football, basketball, recruiting, and NIL with top-notch reporting and video interviews. And most of all, Nick is the play-by-play voice of Rutgers Wrestling. So we are excited to get into it. Nick, thank you for joining us on Ary Bros Radio. Welcome, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. Good to talk to you. I've seen your content as of late over the last few weeks and if not months. It's really good stuff, and yeah, excited to talk to you guys.
Sweet. Well, Nick, before we get too far into it, if you have any other areas on the socials that you would like people to find you, if you want people to find you or what you got going on with one, the floor is yours.
Yeah, just to reiterate, and also a correction, it's on three. So
Oh, I'm
that's the yeah.
sorry.
No, it's
My
all
bad.
good. Yeah, on three, we're the fastest rising college sports media company in terms of college football, basketball, recruiting, NIL, transfer portal, you name it. And then the one guy who's definitely spearheading the wrestling coverage as well over at On Three is me for sure. But yeah, follow me on Twitter at Nick Kosko 59. NickKosko 59, and I have the same handle for Instagram. I don't put I put a little more personal content on Instagram, but you can find my work and some other stuff that that kind of gives me a little bit more behind the scenes stuff. But Twitter's my mainstay, but you can follow me on Instagram as well. And again, my YouTube page, same thing at Nick Kosko 59, or just search my name. I'm sure you're bound to find it. I usually throw up all my on three wrestling podcasts up there. I put some other reels up there in terms of my other work. If you want to check out my work in terms of my play-by-play work, and of course other on three content. I have recorded podcasts with Tim Tebow, Michael Irvin before with some of my other companies, and also again go-to source for Rutgers Wrestling. I put all my Rutgers Wrestling coverage and media stuff up there as well. So that's pretty much it. I'm in the sports media business. I'm unfortunately on my phone all the time, so I'll certainly be alerted if you check my workout.
Right
Nick,
on.
I will take the bullet for Rich for that on three sports. I do a lot of the notes, getting all the information. I
Oh,
and
good.
I know it's on three sports. Something happened when I was editing it, and he just read it. And sometimes it's like Ron Burgundy on the prompter. He just kind of reads
It's all
what's up
good.
Who
there.
put
So
a
I will
comma
take
or who
I
put a
will take the
question mark?
bullet. But Rich, you want to cue Nick up with the Jersey question?
Absolutely. So, Nick, one thing we like to do with all of our Jersey guests, the first question we have for you is it pork roll or Taylor ham?
pork roll. It's not even close. Don't even get Taylor ham out of here. It's pork roll. Taylor ham is the brand. Pork roll is the actual meat. So get out of here with that Taylor ham. If somebody offers me a Taylor ham, egg and cheese, I'm going to say I have no idea what that is. I would like a pork roll, egg and cheese, please. Everything bagel. In fact, I'm probably getting one Saturday morning as well. So I'll take that. That's a little weekend treat for me.
Heck yeah. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the pork roll, egg and cheese on an everything bagel as well. That's usually my go-to when I come home.
Yeah, no doubt. It's the I mean, I'll do the occasional, bacon, egg, and cheese, but I can't really turn down a pork roll, egg, and cheese. But yeah, it's pork roll. Don't even, don't mention Taylor ham around my house. So it's pork roll.
Yeah. I mean, most of the people we have on, whether they're still in Jersey or elsewhere, with the exception of those Ivy League coaches from North Jersey, they're the only ones that say Taylor ham.
Yeah, I think once you get north of Rutgers University, my alma mater, that's when it starts getting a little dicey, unfortunately. But usually from Rutgers on down, you're pretty safe with the pork roll. I'm pretty sure anytime I got a breakfast sandwich when I was in college, I'm pretty sure every bagel place said pork roll. I don't remember Taylor ham. I think once you get a little bit further north, once you get up to the well, give or take, if you go up to Garden State Park, but once you hit like the 140s, 150s, and you start getting like, oh, there's here's all the entrances to get to New York City. That's when you get the Taylor ham, and that's when I start veering back towards south.
Yeah. Well, now that you're a South Jersey guy, I'm curious because I have a friend down here in South Carolina who lived in North Jersey, and he likes to say that there's no such thing as Central Jersey. So, as a South Jersey guy who's married to what Jimmy and I would consider a Central Jersey girl, is it north to south, or is there Central Jersey
Yeah,
down there?
unfortunately, I mean, to my wife's dismay, I have to say it's still north and south, but I have to acknowledge, as long as I acknowledge her existence, I got to acknowledge Central Jersey as well. So, yeah, so around her there is Central Jersey, but when I'm being honest about how I actually feel, it's only North and South Jersey. And plus, I mean, I cover high school football too, so there's North 1, North 2, and there's South and Central sections. It really should be North 1, North 2, and South 1 and South 2, but I digress. So in reality, there's no Central Jersey, but for my wife's sake, there is Central Jersey. So I
All
kind of go
right.
back and forth now.
All right. Happy wife, happy life. So, Nick, one other
Nick,
thing. Oh, go ahead, Jim.
so a little bit of through line. Sorry I cut you off
No, I
there,
was going to
Rich,
do that
but
anyway.
a little bit of a through line. We know you used to call the matches for Rutgers on the radio when you were in college, and we actually started Ary Bros Radio at a college radio station in Denver at Metropolitan State. I attended the University of Colorado, Denver, and it shared a campus with three other schools, and Metropolitan State had a radio station. So we got our first 50 episodes in at the radio station, and then COVID happened. But we kind of, I'm born in 1987, kid of the 90s. Rich was in college in the 90s, and we would go and watch all his track and cross country meets. And every college we went to had a radio station on the campus, and that was always something that was like, oh my God, that is the most awesome thing. So to know you're a college radio guy and you did some AM radio stuff too,
Mhm.
I just want to kind of give you dabs for that and something we kind of have in common.
Yeah, I didn't really know how I wanted to go about this business in college. I always kind of knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in sports media. It was probably writing firsthand because again, I wasn't, I wasn't I mean, I was an athlete growing up, my entire life, but I didn't think I was going to end up going pro, obviously. And then at a certain point, I was like, well, I'm not going to college either in terms of my athletics. I was a very very average wrestler, not a good record, then a very average football player, undersized. So I played offensive line, which is hard to believe. I'm saying 5'11", 195 pounds, 200 pounds. So playing offensive line was not in the cards for college. So, I always want to stay in the business. I was thinking writing first, and then I would say it was it was like right before my sophomore year of college, because I didn't quite know what I wanted to do in terms of extracurriculars outside of the classroom at college yet. So I joined the club wrestling team to get back into the sport in the second half of my freshman year. So then my sophomore year, my one friend Julian, he actually said, "I'm going to this meeting to go to the student radio station and check it out." He gave me all the information about it, so I went to a meeting and then I was immediately hooked. But I was like, "Yeah, this is basically how I grew up." listening to sports talk radio on the radio, either locally in Jersey or nationally on ESPN, or if I can get the range, I would still try to find out the WFAN stuff. Is that at least back then, even going when I was growing up, that was still classic stuff. I was very young for Mike and the Mad Dog, but I knew of Mad Dog, who I ended up actually interning for while I was in college, and then of course that led to Sirius XM. So I was very familiar with the medium, and then I was like, oh, this is really cool, and I always had a passion for broadcasting, for play-by-play, I should say. So that kind of led me to the student radio station, and then of course the rest is history. And then you mentioned how I used to broadcast wrestling on the radio. As students at Rutgers at WRSU, there was always an opportunity to broadcast football, men's and women's basketball, baseball, softball, soccer, you name it, all the sports. Never did wrestling. That was right when the program got into the Big Ten. I was always a big wrestling guy, and I kind of got into college wrestling more around 2013, the height of the Kyle David Taylor rivalry, and then it carried over into college as I was going to a Big Ten school. And then all of a sudden, Rutgers Wrestling, Iowa, Ohio State, Penn State, you name it. And so from there, I said to my broadcast administrator, Mike Pavlichko, I said, we don't cover this. I know the sport. And then my sports director at the time was a senior, this guy, Dylan. I said, he wrestled before too. We know the sport. Why don't we try this out on the radio? So we did. And then again, it just built from there, where we broadcasted 2 matches that year. We ended up pitching our idea to broadcast NCAAs at Madison Square Garden. And then once we did that, we were like, yeah, we can work this out as students. And then my buddy Mike Antashowitz, who was my longtime broadcast partner, I say a long time, but it was a good stretch of 2 years in college because we did so much together. He went the lawyer route, I went the sports media route, so I think he's making off better right now. But him and I broadcast together for the next 2 years as juniors and seniors. Did all the home meets, did select road meets, and did all the tournaments, Big Tens and NCAAs, and then just morphed into me joining the Big Ten Plus broadcast at Rutgers with my former partner, Lou Brogno, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago. So once he passed away, I went from color to play-by-play on Big Ten Plus, and then was reunited with my broadcast partner from college, Matt, who's our third guy when I was a senior. So him and I do the matches now on Big Ten Plus, and so that student radio idea of me just saying, let's try wrestling on the radio kind of spearheaded to me doing this for now my 10th year overall with Rutgers.
That is amazing. And you mentioned a lot of things there that caught my ear, and a couple of things I want to touch on. So you said you started with the college radio station. Did you have any experience calling games or matches in high school, or did that start in college? And was your major broadcasting, or did you kind of fall into it because of the radio station?
Yeah, so I mean, I went to Rutgers as a journalism major. I didn't wait to declare my major. As soon as I got in, I was like, yep, journalism major, specialization in sports media. And again, that's always what I wanted to do. So I was thinking about writing for the student newspaper, the Daily Targum. I was thinking about the Our Vision, which actually helps out with our Big Ten Plus broadcaster, the production side of it. And sometimes those students can get opportunities on the air, but it's mostly like, working the camera, directing a broadcast, producing it, all that good stuff. And then once I was pointed to the radio station, that's where I started broadcasting for the first time. Because I never did it, and I think I've told this story before, but it's funny because I always loved the broadcasting aspect of it. And being from South Jersey, I'm a huge Eagles fan, and I'm a big Merrill Reese guy. He's been the voice of the Eagles for almost 50 years at this point. So I would always, when I was little, when I was about between the ages of like 7 and 10, when I was watching the Eagles, and Comcast on demand used to have like the replay, like the quick replays of the game, and they would play the radio calls. So I would always listen back to that just so I could hear the radio calls. I was a big Madden guy growing up, Madden in college football video games as well. So I would actually put the games on mute and start calling them myself because I actually knew what I was doing as far as like the players were concerned. So I started like trying to emulate Merrill Reese or guys like Joe Buck, who I still look up to now as like one of my favorite broadcasters. So I started trying to emulate that. That's how I knew I had an interest in it. It just didn't come full force or right in front of me until I saw the radio station. I knew these guys were hosting their own shows. They were producing their own shows. They were producing and broadcasting live games. So once I saw that in person for the first time, I know it was a radio medium, but I was familiar with the radio medium. I was like, all right, this is what I want to do. And I actually, I do it now professionally, which is nice. I know my full-time job, ironically, is writing, but it's supplement. My broadcasting is now supplemented by that, which I have no problem with. I always just wanted to get in the business. But yeah, that was the first time I saw it in person and like up close. I'm like, all right, yeah, this is definitely what I want to do, and not just pretend to do it.
When I mean, Jimmy and I, so Jimmy said we got our start in the college studio, but we also live not too far from Greeley, Colorado, where UNC
Mhm.
is, and so we thought it would be a great idea to go up and cover the UNC versus Northern Iowa duel, and we quickly realized that you have to have a lot of things to talk about when you're watching a 1 point match or a 3-2 match. What was the learning curve like for you?
It was interesting because my first live play-by-play broadcast actually was a Rutgers wrestling match because at least then, now I'm sure they've changed policy a little bit since I've been a student, where they kind of wanted you to get your reps up, get your production reps up, and kind of get on some other play-by-play calls before you did football. Because I always wanted, like, when I got into this, I was like, I want to do football. I want to be the next voice of the Eagles. I want to call the Super Bowl. I want to do all this stuff. You know, be a TV or radio guy calling the NFL. That's the ultimate goal. And maybe it does happen one day in my life. I still have I feel like I still have a long way to go in my career anyway. So, but my first call was actually a Rutgers wrestling match because I pitched the idea and because I knew the sport. So I just took elements of what I knew. I was kind of thrown into the fire a little bit, but I came in prepared because of I knew the sport already, which was a huge advantage comparing to, you throw anybody else in my shoes that never wrestled or doesn't know the sport at all, and you say, okay, here's your first call. It's not football yet, it's not basketball yet, but here you go. Here's wrestling. Good luck on that. So knew the rules, knew the sport, having wrestled for a while at that point, still wrestling for the club, the college club team, but up at Rutgers. So it was a little bit trial by fire, and I think just getting my pacing down and my speed down, which I still work on to this day because I still talk too fast, as you can probably imagine, being from Jersey. I try to reel that in a little bit, especially now being broadcasting a lot more television and streaming over the last 5, 6 years. I've been able to kind of rein it in, but I'm actually fun fact. I don't know when this is going to premiere, but as we're recording this tomorrow, I'm going to be back on the radio for a high school football game for the first time, doing football on the radio for the first time in I'm going to say 7 years now. So that'll be very interesting. Where I'll probably talk a little bit faster, but that was my biggest issue. Then was just talking too fast and trying to get too much information out at once. So I've kind of reeled that in ever since then. But yeah, it was trial by fire. I was nervous. I didn't want to screw up. But it really did help me that I knew the sport and I had an experienced student with me, my guy Dylan, who was 2 years older than me, and our sports director at the time. And the fact that he already knew wrestling as well, that also helped us to bounce off each other. And then we kind of once we got into the rhythm of it, which was at the time, okay, 125, I'll call it. 33, Dylan calls it. 41. So we went back and forth, and once we adjusted to the pacing of watching it live and actually calling it, that's when we found our rhythm. And again, we didn't do much that year other than doing the tournament at MSG, which was a lot over 3 days. But once we got that timing down, it was like, okay, yeah, this is actually going to be. I don't want to say easier than I thought, but I'll be able to adjust this pretty quickly.
Right on, right on. Have you worked with a coach of any sorts to help you with fast talk and the Jersey fast talk or anything?
No, no, it's pretty much just on my own accord, and
Mhm.
talking to other professionals too. I've been able to reach out to broadcasters that I admire and the ones that I respect their work. I mean, I've reached out to Adam Amin before, because I know he used to call wrestling for ESPN, and now he's calling, and he's on the NFL on Fox, and he calls baseball for Fox as well. So he's had a fast rise to his career, dating back to his late to early, his late 20s to his early 30s, and now I believe he's in his late 30s and not 40 at this point. So he's had a long, successful career. He was one of the first guys that helped me out, just give me feedback on some tape. Shane Sparks, who I'm really good friends with now at this point, he loves my work, which I'm really, I'm humbled by that he likes what I'm doing. So he's given me feedback before, I believe, a handful of years ago. I'm talking about like 4 or 5 years ago at this point, but now him and I just have a great interaction. He's been on my podcast before, which is nice. Mike Cousins, who, if you're familiar with him, he's on ESPN, calls college football, does college basketball, I'm pretty sure, but he also does college wrestling on ESPN. He calls the NCAA tournament. He actually gave me feedback because he still does wrestling. And again, same pointers, like, basically everyone wants to tell me, and I don't want to brag here, but everyone's like, your energy's fantastic. But then they always say, you can always reel it in. You can always diversify your speech a little bit, in these little spots. So once I hear feedback like that, either from the wrestling guys or another guy who I really like, who calls football right now, does college football, does the Chiefs preseason games, Ari Wolf. I was a big guy. I was a big fan of his because he did arena football. I was a huge arena football fan, and I actually did call arena football back in 2019 on the radio when Atlantic City had a team for a year, playing Philadelphia, playing Washington, all those good teams. Um, So basically, everyone tells me the same thing. Like energy's fantastic. You know what you're doing. You sound like you know what you're doing. You're gonna always you're gonna continue to get better if you work on these little tidbits. So just getting feedback from them, and obviously getting feedback from my colleagues. Even my wife is my wife's in the media as well, so she'll give me pointers once in a while. If she tells me she likes something, or she'll give me constructive criticism as well. So that's helped out through the entire time of my professional career since leaving college, which was almost 7 years ago at this point. So at that point, it's like I don't need not that I don't need a coach. Could I use a coach? Yeah, I'm sure everybody can use a coach. Everybody can always get better, but I've been finding that I'm pretty successful in just relying on colleagues, other professionals if they're willing to help, and just the people around me. And then I'm very good about teaching and coaching myself and saying, all right, hey, like don't screw up here, like stop saying this or something along those lines, and then just take it from there and try to improve every broadcast.
All right, all right. That high school game you said you were calling, is that part of the state playoffs?
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
actually it's mainland regional against Somerville. So we've been covering mainland regional at Cape Atlantic Live, another side gig I have that does all the high school sports in South Jersey. So we've been covering mainland for the last 4 years, primarily as their home broadcaster for football on TV, on YouTube streaming. So I'm very familiar with them. I'm very familiar with them. Excuse me. And they were my rival high school when I was going to Egg Harbor Township. So I am
Yeah.
very familiar with mainland. But I'm doing the game on the radio tomorrow with actually Mike Pavlichko, who I alluded to before, because he does Central Jersey sports radio. See, there we go. That's that Central Jersey moniker again. So, but I'm calling the game. Yeah, I'm calling the game on radio with him tomorrow. It's an online radio because he covers Somerville. So I'm joining his broadcast. We're gonna split play-by-play duties tomorrow. So that'd be really cool to go up north and reunite with him and obviously call the game together. But yeah, that'll be that's more high school football for me. Yeah.
All right. Yep. Yeah. When we talked to Rock, he was talking about how he's his own stat guy. Are you your own stat guy?
I try to be. I'm not very good at keeping stats, although he showed me a new system, Mike did, how he does it. He usually has a guy with him, but I actually call football solo, which is not unheard of at the high school level. But if you look at a college or professional game, you're like, have a color commentator. I haven't had a color commentator for football, I think, in I want to say 4 years now, maybe three, but at least the last 3 years, I've been completely solo with football on the air, which is a little bit easier when it's TV/streaming instead of radio. Because radio, you have to describe everything, and you kind of want to take a breath. So TV can let the picture breathe a little bit. But I try to keep. I've been doing better at keeping scoring plays and like the yardage of scoring plays at this point. But I might be implementing new systems. So there you go. Taking feedback from my colleagues and a guy who essentially was one of my teachers/coaches in college, and Mike Pavlichko. That I will take his stat system as well as maybe his new spotting chart system for football next year.
Okay.
Nick, sorry to go too nerd on the play-by-play color commentary, but
No, it's fine.
You do what we want to do. We are envious of you. We want to call wrestling matches. We want to cover track and cross country meets. I'm curious, what do you prefer doing, play-by-play or color commentary?
It's play-by-play. It's not even close. Color comment. It's nothing against color commentary, but I've done like back in college, like we had, you had to split duties of play-by-play and color. So, generally for football, one guy does one half, the other guy does the other half, and then you switch off, so I'll do color, I'll do color for the first half, and then I'll do play-by-play for the second half, something along those lines. And it's actually what I'm doing tomorrow with Mike. I'll be doing play-by-play for the first half, and I'll do color for the second half. That's just how we're going to switch tomorrow. Now for color, the only thing I've done color as of late is wrestling mostly because before I switched over into the play-by-play chair on Big Ten Plus, Lou was the play-by-play guy. He was the play-by-play guy for all the Rutgers sports on Big Ten Plus. So he would, he called soccer, he called field hockey, he called wrestling, called basketball when needed, baseball. So, and I've done a little baseball color commentary as well, but no, maybe it's an ego thing for all broadcasters, but you want to do play-by-play because generally if you're not, especially at the college level, or I shouldn't say the college level. I should say if you're broadcasting college sports or professional sports and you're on the ESPNs, the Foxes, the CBSs, if you're on those networks, generally the play-by-play guy is a guy like me who, might have an athletic background, but you weren't a college all-star, you weren't a professional. That's reserved for the color commentator who is going to be able to explain the nuances to the audience, whether it's radio or TV, either in a complicated way for the niche viewer, or obviously in a dumbed down way for the casual viewer, which is generally what they do anyway. But they're able to digest, or I should say, diagnose the complicated stuff of football, for instance, and say, here's why they're in this coverage, here's why they're playing cover two or man, and here's the explanation, and I can use the telestrator, all that stuff. So can I do that to an extent? Sure. But am I diverse in that? No, because I'm still far enough removed from football, my playing days in high school, where, and again, I primarily played offense anyway, so it's tough to I can give you an explanation as to why things happen in football. I could do it better with wrestling because I still, am around the sport a lot more. And also, I mean, I do train in jiu-jitsu, so I'm very, very familiar with all these positions and why something happens. So I can do color for wrestling for sure, not a problem. I still do it actually. If I go over to, let's say, I do broadcasts for UPenn a little bit as well. So and generally that's been more color commentary for me, unless there's a play-by-play opening. But I've done color for Penn, and when I do that, I know how to explain positions, because generally nobody else knows how to do that, because a lot of these streaming broadcasts for these colleges, you don't have like the mainstays from the big networks coming down to do it. You have guys that are, freelancing all the time, and wrestling is generally the sport that people don't know as much about. So yeah, I'm fine with color, but yeah, play by play is my job, and also what I'm striving to do full time. Maybe one day, if that brings me to a full time play by play gig where I'm doing stuff for ESPN or CBS or whatever the case may be, yeah, that'd be the ultimate goal in doing a bunch of sports and having that be my day to day operation.
So you mentioned you still train, you do jujitsu, and you mentioned, you know the sport of wrestling, so you feel comfortable breaking down the moves, giving the technique. And when we talked to Rock, he talked about how he had a three-tier system of how he tries to
Mhm.
get the heads, get the people who are really into it, get the people who know a little bit, and get the people that know absolutely nothing about it. Do you
Mhm.
have anything like that where you try to check the boxes off that you're not going over people's heads? What's your approach to it?
Yeah, I try to keep that in the back of my head. I don't think I necessarily have a three-tiered system like Rock does. So, I mean, if I do want to adapt that, I'll give him all the credit for kind of developing that for wrestling broadcasters. But generally, when I'm doing play-by-play, and again, my guy Matt, who broadcasts with me at Rutgers, he's done, Matt Howe, he does a fantastic job. I try to say we're the best broadcast tandem in the Big Ten, if not the country. That's just us propping ourselves up. But he does a great job of explaining stuff too. Sometimes him and I can get a little too technical, and we're just like, okay, whoever's watched this, we're just like, who the heck knows what we're talking about? Unless you wrestled or you're a gigantic wrestling fan. So not, in layman's terms, yeah, I do try to dumb it down a little bit. And then when I do my play-by-play, especially on television where you can see what's going on, I try to associate the basics, the fundamentals of wrestling. Because again, I still train jujitsu. I help teach our kids program as well. And then occasionally when I have to fill in and as a the teacher for a class, like whether it's a basic jujitsu class or even a wrestling class at my gym, I try to I use those principles where I'm teaching people in person, and I try to bring that onto a broadcast as well, where I'll say say Dylan Shawver shoots in for a single leg or a high C. I'll explain that. I won't say he won't. I'm not saying he's going to go crossbody, or I'm not going to throw out this random terminology that only guys in college would know. I'm just going to say he's in on a single leg. He's trying to elevate it, because I'm literally just trying to describe what he is doing. And then Matt will come in and basically answer, okay, here's why that worked, and here's what he did in order to get to that position. And I think that's in hearing him do the color commentary and getting better at it year in and year out. It's the only broadcasting he does at this point. And then that allows me to take tidbits from him, take tidbits from what I do and still in my own training and how I still teach and coach, and then implement that into when I do color for another school, for instance, or another broadcast. I'll basically bring all that in and kind of combine it together. So that's kind of how I explain it. I don't necessarily have a tier system like Rock does, but I do keep it in the back of my head, like, okay, I'll explain moves, but let's not get into the nitty gritty here. And like, his wrist had to be at 45-degree angles, or his elbow had to be in this, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that teaching jujitsu kind of helps you, and calling matches helps you when you're teaching jujitsu. I am
Yeah.
a lifetime ago, I had my purple belt at 10
Mhm.
Planet Jiu-Jitsu. I haven't trained in a minute because I'm an old man. That said, I noticed teaching helped me get better for the sport. So it's interesting that the commentary helps you with teaching and vice versa. So I find that interesting. At the beginning of the show, you mentioned you did an internship with Mike from Mike and the Mad Dog. And I mean, I don't even, Rich and I, we are strictly wrestling and running. We don't
Yeah.
watch quote unquote professional sports.
Yeah.
But I can listen to Mike and the Mad Dog. That was just like
Yeah.
something that was on in the background growing up. That's like nostalgia, comfort food for me. What was that experience like? Do you have any funny stories, anything like that for us?
I actually interned for Doggy himself, Chris Russo, just to clarify. But
Okay.
this was when I was in college, so my senior year of college. So this would be the fall of 2017. I interned for Mad Dog Radio. I applied for basically at the time, and the internship program could be totally different now, as far as I know. As I ended up working for SiriusXM for a couple of years part time until I got a full time gig with 24/7 Sports, and obviously I've worked at On3 the last 2 years. But I interned there fall of 2017. Basically the top internship was to work for Doggy, to work for Mad Dog Unleashed, work on be his intern, with Colin and Eddie as the producers. You're the intern, so. Back then, I know they've probably changed a little bit, but it was grunt work. I'm not gonna lie, it was grunt work. You're cutting it. You're cutting up promos. You're basically putting stuff, locking stuff on, locking his interviews on demand, making sure all that stuff goes. Again, it's grunt work. Gotta get the lunch. I can get lunch too, but gotta get everybody else's lunch. Gotta go downstairs to the food truck and go get it. I was totally fine with it. I knew it. I knew what to expect. It's an internship. What am I gonna do? So, but it was great. He's a guy that I idolized as a sports talk radio legend, I would say. He's the best. I can't name a single sports talk radio host that's better than him. I don't think anybody will be better than him in my lifetime because obviously the medium has vastly changed anyway. So, but it was great working for him and seeing how he operates, how he prepares for a show. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say I also worked on Steve Torrey's show, who's still up there. He basically helps run the channel. He's got his own show. His time slots changed a bunch of times, but his show at the time was leading into Doggies. It was 1 to 3. So I would work on Steve's show, help him out, and then do that 1 to 3, and then be with Doggy 3 to 6. Then I'd be done for the day. So I'd be in there at like 11 o'clock, work for like 7 hours, and get out of there, or however the time worked out there. So it was great. As far as funny stories, other than him just kind of busting my chops a little bit, I'd say that's pretty much it. He busts everybody's chops. So um, what was it? I wish I still had the audio, but there was so. I will say, hit my last day, he did give me a nice little shout out on the air. Like it was like 5 seconds, but it was like right at the end of the show. He did say that we're gonna miss you, so I'll never forget that. That was great. So it was nice to hear that, and nice to know that I did a great job for him. Gave me a big hug afterwards, and I got to interact with him a little bit while I still worked there. But I wish I saw the audio of it. But there was one time where I think he was doing something with college football. And again, this is, I know the playoff has expanded now, and then like the playoff talk is raging right now, but this is still within the first couple of years of the college football playoff, where you only had 4 teams, and he was doing some kind of college football segment, and they alluded something along the lines of, I think he wanted Colin or Eddie, one of his producers, to look up something. And usually that's where I would chime in too and try to help him out. Maybe turn my computer screen and like sometimes say like, here, Chris, like here's what you're looking for. So one time I turn my screen and he looks down and he goes, oh, Nick, he's like, Nick, I can't see it. I have my glasses. I cannot see it, Nick. And he's busting my chops about that. And then there was another time, might be the same day. He said something on the air. He was just like, he goes, we got Colin worrying about his New York Islanders tickets. Eddie's over there, working on his next lunch. Then he goes, Nick's over here too, worried about a Rutgers football. At the time, of course, Rutgers was not really good, so it was a nice little busting of the chops on the air, which was nice. So, I feel like you're part of the Mad Dog family at that point if you can get that respect from Doggy. So, nothing too crazy. He was a great boss. I still admire him now. I love what he's doing now that he has his little bit of a career resurgence with ESPN's First Take. So I'm loving it, and I really appreciate my what was it, about 3-4 months with him. So I'll always look back on that time pretty fondly.
Yeah, that's like Jimmy said, that's nostalgia for us. That was something my dad's a huge Giant fan, so listen to that on the way to school, getting dropped off and stuff. You got to live out probably a lot of kids' dream to be able to be in the studio and do those sorts of things. Um, we are into wrestling season. I
Mhm.
think we're coming up on week 3 or week 4. You had the opportunity to go to formerly known as the Ritaco Center. I don't even know what they call it
Yeah.
these days, but
The
the
RWJ Barnabas Arena. So a bit of a mouthful.
RWJ. Yeah, that is a lot to say. The Jersey Journeyman Jersey Jostle was this past Saturday. You got to do that on the radio.
Mm.
What were your thoughts on Rutgers and their performance and what you saw?
Ups and downs, and just a quick note: the fact that I got to do it on radio actually was pretty cool. So I got to give a big shout out to the SID, Brad Derahilo. He helped me out, helped me set that up, and Kyle Knox from Our Vision, who actually set up the equipment and was with me and basically producing the broadcast. The fact that we got an online radio broadcast for the first time in Rutgers history to do wrestling, other than the student radio station, obviously, but that was the first time there was a professional broadcast put on display for the program. So shout out to those guys for helping me set that up. Maybe there's some in the future for other road meets either this year or hopefully next year. But that was kind of like again, like I spearheaded in college. I wanted to spearhead a professional idea for myself and maybe others down the line to do this for the program, other than just what I do at inside Jersey Mike's Arena. But yeah, it was pretty cool. The fact that I got to call on the radio, and then they pretty much dominated LIU. No surprise right there. The lineup is still pretty deep, and then the NC State match. I'm sure people either whether they were watching on UFC Fight Pass or listening to me, it was back and forth. I think Rutgers is pretty much, this might be the deepest team that I've seen in the last 10 years. And I don't know if it's going to be the best team because, again, it's tough to top the one team they had. I believe it was the 2015-16 year. You still had Anthony Perotti. I think it was the year he got his second All-American accolades. Anthony Ashnell was on that team. Scott Del Vecchio, guys like that. Nick Gravina was still on the team. Richie Lewis. That was. Plus, I was in college, so I kind of have nostalgia for that team because I was students. I was students with those guys and also calling their matches. But that team knocked off number 4 Nebraska. I think they might have the record still for most dual meet victories in a season. I think they were 15-6 that year. So this team could be as good based on the talent they have and the fact that they have 4 All-Americans in the lineup and 10 total guys that were NCAA qualifiers already. So we'll see how that pans out. So again, tough day for Dean Peterson. I know he got hurt in the match against NC State against Vincent Robinson, who's an all-star freshman for the Wolfpack. Still high on. I'm not going to overreact like Coach Goodell said to us afterwards. No panic button. Not going to overreact. It's one match. We're 3-1 right now. So we have Virginia. They have Virginia Tech tomorrow. And then all of a sudden, they have a big Big Ten schedule, obviously. So not going to panic yet, not going to overreact. So he had a tough weekend. Dylan Shawver looked great. It was a tighter match than I thought, but again, early part of the season, I'm very high on Shawver. I think he's in my contenders tier for a national title again this year after what he did last year. I like what I saw out of Joey Oliveira taking Kyle Reading to the brink right there. Arguably could have won that match on a locked hands call. Who knows? 49, they have something to figure out with Chetta and Clark. I like both those guys, but that's going to be a nice little battle that's going to take place for quite a bit. 57, really high on the freshman, Connor Hare. If you guys know about him from his high school days in Montgomery over in Pennsylvania, was one of the best recruits that they've ever gotten. I think he's their district's all-time wins leader. He had like 180 wins in high school. He looked good before that, and then obviously he ran into an All-American and Ed Scott, so got a little freight train, but it's okay. He's a freshman. What are you going to do? Andrew Barbosa, the other freshman, stepped up at 165, so I'm eager to see if he's going to be the guy there or if it's going to be the veteran Anthony White at this point. Turley, I'm not really concerned about Jackson Turley. Matches like that happen. Lost by a takedown. Guy's an All-American in the past. I think he can make a big run again this year. He's healthy, which is good. So, again, it's only one match. Soldano, who knows what's going to happen with him? I know Coach Goodell has said publicly that Shane Cartagena-Walsh is going to be in the running now at 184. So I'm interested to see how that weight class shakes out since Brian Soldano is a 2-time NCAA qualifier. Cartagena-Walsh is really good. So I'm interested to see who goes out there against Virginia Tech and then how they basically decide this. Because I think Soldano can beat pretty much anybody in the country on his best day, but unfortunately he has his other days where you see like on Sunday where fell a little short against NC State's Dylan Fishback. Really couldn't get his offense going, and you'll have matches like that with Soldano. John Poznanski, my guy, he's awesome. I love watching him. I think I don't want to put this label on him yet, but I think if you're talking about national title contenders, do not have a list without him on there. I think he can be that good, and now that he's fully filled out to this weight class after a year with it last year, losing in the blood round. Don't mention 97 title contenders without John Poznanski. And, of course, Slava Kuski. Again, tough loss for him on Sunday, but All-American last year. He's one of the better heavyweights in the country. I think he'll be on the podium again this year. So that long-winded answer is for me to say, like, they to me, are more developed and have more talent and depth than they did last year, where they had 2 All-Americans. And again, I'm going to echo what Coach Goodale said already many times. They don't want to be top 15 anymore. They don't want to go with 8 NCAA qualifiers and have 2 All-Americans. And yeah, it's a good season, but we want 10 guys in the tournament. We want 4 or 5 All-Americans. We want national champs. We want team trophies. That we want to be top 10 in the country. We want to be top 5 in the country. They can do that. It's just a matter of putting it actually on the mat, which I know that it's been like the same old story for the last 5 years, as a lot of Rutgers fans would say, since they had 2 guys win national titles, a national and Suriano. So is it going to happen this year? I think it can, but again, it's still so early in the season. I don't want to make any big proclamations of like they're not going to do it or they're definitely going to do it, but they certainly have more capability of doing that compared to, I would say, last year.
Right on.
Rich,
right on.
Nick just ran through the whole lineup without looking at a piece of
I
paper.
know,
off
it's
the top of
impressive. That's why he's a pro.
Yep.
I think it is kind of wild because people have asked like, how do you prepare for a match? And I'm just like, well, I mean, I write all my boards down. You know, I have my lineup list and I have backups in there in case I need them. And but I think it is kind of wild for other teams. I make sure I have research, and I might need a little reference point if I'm doing a podcast or I'm broadcasting on a match. But I go back to my college days, and I'm just like, I was students with these guys. I mean, I basically know these guys in and out at this point. I'm studying the lineup and being a guy who's broadcasted for this team for 10 years. I'm just like, well, at this point, if you don't know the lineup in and out off the top of your head, like you're not doing well enough. You're not doing enough research. So, and the fact that I have a good relationship with the entire coaching staff, that really does help me out. And then I follow all these guys on Instagram, on social media, and I've interacted with them quite a bit. They know who I am. I know who they are. I'm not saying I'm a big celebrity around there. I'm just like, at least they know who I am, and I'm trying to do right by them. Of course, trying to prop them up, and I'm a big supporter of all them because I'm an alum. I was students with none of the current team. I wasn't students with, but you go back to my college days where Anthony Ashland's over at Princeton now, coaching for Princeton, which is kind of wild considering he's a Rutgers legend. But I was over at Princeton. I did some stuff for Princeton during an open practice, and him and I have a great him and I get along fantastic. Because we were students together, and the fact that I covered his career and continue to show him love. Now I show again. Princeton's a big Rutgers rival, so if I'm broadcasting a Rutgers Princeton match, I'm probably gonna show more love to Rutgers. Because it's the home broadcast in the end, of course. But I respect all these guys. The fact if I can build a relationship with you, then I'm going to know more about you. And then right there, that just helps me rattle this stuff off the top of my head.
Did you call the 2019 Kolodzik match?
I did, yeah. So Lou was still on the call. So he was doing the play-by-play. I was doing the color, but. Yeah, I will. I'll make sure to remind folks that is the loudest that arena's ever been. And I know Rutgers basketball has had some extremely loud moments since then. And I know they now have Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, and this could be a big-time tournament team. And you got 2 guys that are going to go to the NBA next year. Nothing is ever going to top that in terms of noise in that arena, and I will stick by that until I'll take it to my grave. I'll tell you that unless something else crazy happens where it's out of thin air. I will always say the loudest that arena has ever been, formerly known as the Rack, is when Ashnault beat Anthony Ashnault beat Matthew Kolodzik. That match to me was the loudest it's ever been in that arena, and it happened. The deafening point was, I think it was the second. It might have been his second takedown. It was a scoreless first period. I think it was the second takedown where he took him out almost out of bounds. I forget exactly, but I'm pretty sure it was the second takedown where it was I couldn't hear. I took my headset off because it was ringing in my ears, but it didn't help because the crowd was so darn loud. And then of course the ovation when he clinched the major decision. That's when I was like, "This is unbelievable. You are never going to top this in a dual meet." And now, unless they upset the number 1 team in the country, they're not going to top that. That to me is an all-time Rutgers moment.
Yeah, that was amazing. Jimmy and I were living in Denver and got the opportunity to watch that on the computer, but it was just, all the talk leading into that, and then just
1 versus 2.
Yeah, and the way he finished it out, and
So I haven't asked him about that since then. And I talked to Chris Ayers actually a couple months ago. It actually might have been about a month or 2 ago at this point. Obviously, he's at Stanford now. Yeah. That was the first time I actually got to talk to him on a long form deal. I might have interacted with him a little bit when he's at Princeton, at the tournaments maybe, but I never Never wanted to do this in his face. I mean, I'm sure he's seen it enough because I know Ashton was going. He was going. He's pointing at him. He's like, yeah, that's 10. That's 10. You said, and I think I told the story on the air too, during that broadcast, and I knew exactly why he was doing that. He was like, he flashed it while he was still on top of him, pushed him down, got up, flashed the 10, gave him the little seeing eyeglass right there, and went 10 again. So all-time moment from Ashton, and it was because Chris Ayers said, it bit him in the butt. He said that Ashton would not be able to score on Koladzic. Now, I forget exactly if he said Anthony's name or he just said in general, like, no one's going to score on Matt Koladzic. That's fine, but, it bit him in the butt. It was funny. Chris Ayers is a great dude, so I'm sure he probably laughs at it now at this point. So, and I'm pretty sure actually Ashton and Koladzic actually get along now because obviously I think Koladzic's done wrestling, but the Princeton connection now and the fact that Ashton's over there, I'm sure they get along great. So, but still, yeah, all-time moment. Loudest that's ever been in that arena.
No doubt. Coach Ayers is one of those Taylor Ham guys. And fun fact, Coach Ayers and I were on Team New Jersey together way back when in
Oh, really?
1993.
I mean, that might be Coach Ayers' only flaw is the fact that he's a Taylor Ham guy, but I can't blame North Jersey guy. It's fine. So what are you gonna do? We can't all be perfect.
No, we can't. Curious, Nick, what'd you think of the crowd and everything at the arena for the match?
For the Jersey
matches?
Jostle, yeah,
Yeah.
it was really good. I think he had about 2,000-3,000 in there, if I'm just very rough estimate, but it was pretty good. The fact that they wanted to keep a more of a local crowd in there. You got Rutgers, Princeton, obviously. You got LIU, which is I think that program is very intriguing. The fact that I talked to just a quick aside, I talked to Jamie Franco, the new Hofstra head coach, who went back to the school to take over, and I asked him about that might be a budding rivalry because both of your schools are on Long Island. It's a very niche rivalry up in up in Long Island, New York. So I think that's very interesting and I think that'll be very cool down the line. And then of course you bring in a power like NC State, so that's going to attract the visitors. And I know the event, what was it? Rutgers does wrestle Princeton on their own next month, so they didn't wrestle each other there. But I thought it was cool the fact that I know they built it around Rutgers and NC State, which is that's the marquee event because they're Big Ten, ACC, they're going to be the favorites over Princeton and LIU, but you want to showcase all the wrestling, which is nice. And I'm glad that it was in. Sometimes you need a high school setting like that, a nice little intimate event to showcase this wrestling. And then you can kind of see really up close like how good these guys are, even if it's a program like Princeton or LIU, which I know Princeton has some very talented dudes this year, but they're still in that rebuilding phase. And they're on the up and up now. LIU is obviously trying to build something that's very sustainable as well. And you have established programs like Rutgers and NC State. I think that mix was very cool, and the crowd obviously was loving it, especially when you got Rutgers, NC State. Jersey crowd was going nuts. So Jersey fans are going to bring it regardless. So you bring a big event like that to a centralized location, Jersey fans are going to show out.
Right on. And with the kid from LIU at 125, I know Coach Goodell said he's not worried right now. Is that kid pretty good though?
Yeah, his name is actually escaping me right now, but I wanted to give credit to Austin Sommer, who's over at Intermat. I broadcast with him before, former Drexel wrestler. Hey, he brought him up and he gave him his props as well. Because I think they said it on their podcast on Intermat that can't really worry. Dean Peterson, don't worry about him. He's still really good. But that kid from whose name escapes me right now from LIU, but yeah, he is supposedly. I'm not gonna say it's the real deal, where he's like, yeah, he's gonna be running for the podium this year, the national title. Even though 125 is pretty wild, but yeah, he's no slouch. That's for sure. He's no slouch.
Okay.
Nick, I want to give you props for your post-match breakdown that you gave us, but you went into a little bit more detail on your YouTube channel, and you let us know that his name's eluding me right now. 25-pounder from Dean
Yeah.
Peterson. He failed the concussion test, and that is stuff that we would not know unless we listened to an insider like you. So I got to give you dabs on that. And another thing I want to give you dabs for on your YouTube channel, you got an interview with Donnie when he went over to Columbia. You got an interview with Anthony when he was at Princeton. Those are two guys that our email must have got lost in their spam, and we were jealous when we saw them pop up on your show. So I got to give you dabs for that. But with that said, with a core of that Rutgers coaching staff, and we know Seabass is over in Columbia. What are your thoughts on how they are rebuilding that coaching staff and how the team took those core guys leaving?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie and say it's a big loss for Rutgers when you lose a guy like Donnie Pritzloff who's been there for 10 years, and he joined their first year of the Big Ten. That was my first year of college, actually. So I only know Donnie at this point, being a Rutgers guy. I know he coached at his alma mater at Wisconsin. He coached at Michigan for a little bit too. Um, but he's a Rutgers guy. And now he's a Columbia guy. Obviously, you got to give him props for finally getting his first head coaching job. But it seemed like he wasn't going to leave at any point. And, I think they made that clear. I think Coach Goodell's made that clear too, that, Donnie really wasn't going anywhere. Then, this opportunity pops up and no one's going to stand in his way. He deserved it. He probably deserved to be a head coach about 5 years ago after helping Coach Goodell, John Leonardis at the time when he was still on staff, and Coach Pollard and the entire Rutgers room elevate everybody so they could help have a great season. And then you see Anthony Ashnault and Nick Suriano win national titles. Donnie Pritzloff was an integral part of that. So he probably should have gotten a head coaching job after that season for all we know. But hey, I'm glad he finally got a job. It stinks to see him go. I would love to see him in Rutgers for forever. I always envisioned that, whenever Coach Goodell would retire, Donnie takes over and you just keep it going, but sometimes, these things happen. The coaching carousel is a real thing. So I'm glad he got a head coaching job. It's not too far. It's the right situation for him. I know it's a bit of a challenge now with the Ivy League and a little bit differently in terms of compared to a Big Ten or a Big 12 or ACC school, but I think he's going to do a fantastic job. I think he's already made a big impact on the program, trying to elevate the buzz around Columbia wrestling, and they're going to develop those guys, I would say, rather quickly. It helps when you have a guy like Sebastian Rivera, who, again, Northwestern and Rutgers guy. Him and I developed a pretty good relationship. I love Seabass. He's as Jersey as you think I'm pretty Jersey. That guy's as Jersey gets, being from the Toms River area, and of course, screaming New Jersey after he won his Big Ten title at Rutgers with Northwestern. Put that puzzle together. So he's a great assistant coach. He's going to still compete. He earned his Olympic bronze medal, won a world silver medal. So that's one of the guys that you need on your staff for sure. So I'm glad that he got his opportunity to coach, whether it was going to end up being at Rutgers, but now he's over at Columbia. So I'm glad he got a chance to coach. Again, another guy, hate to see him leave the Rutgers family, but I'm glad these guys branch out, because it just shows the power that Rutgers is developing. And, you can now, it seems like Coach Goodell is going to have a bit of a coaching tree now at this point. So it just goes to show that the program continues to get better in Piscataway. But yeah, Donnie and Seabass over there. Greg Bolzak's on the staff as well. Again, I covered him during his lone year at Rutgers when he was a grad transfer, became an All-American, wrestling for the Scarlet Knights. So he's jacked. He's a hammer. He's one of the scariest 97-pounders I've ever seen. He's probably rolling around at like 215, 220 right now. So, no, I would not even want to flow wrestle with him right now, because he would probably deck me into next week. And, of course, Jeff Buxton's over there, going from the SKWC and now helping out with their program and, of course, their regional training center. So, great to see for Columbia. I'm glad they're going to be now maybe a bit of a contender in the Ivy League, whether it's this year or next year. And then National, that was probably the marquee one after Donnie, to see Anthony – trade in the scarlet red for the orange and the black over in Princeton. But yeah, he's really happy. I know he was on Rutgers staff a couple of years ago. Things didn't work out. Wanted to go back to competing full time, and then he kind of branched off on his own, tried different things, which any natural person would do. He had the Rutgers legend label attached to him his whole life, so I don't blame him. And it was nobody's fault, I would say. It just things happen. You can't stay in one place forever. So I'm glad he decided to come back into coaching. Now, again, as a Rutgers guy, and he's a Rutgers guy too, so it kind of stinks to see him at Princeton, but it's also awesome to see him at Princeton, because I think he's very happy of what he's doing. Now he's full-fledged coach. He's rolling with the guys in the room. He's on these recruiting trips. He's very energized, and he's excited to do it. And I'm very convinced that one day he's definitely going to help Princeton really elevate in the recruiting area, helping out Coach Dubuque, who I respect a lot. Haven't talked to him a good amount at this point, and having Cody Brewer on that staff really helps as well, along with Nate Jackson. But to me, if he's going to be in coaching long term, this is what he wants to do for the bulk of his working career in wrestling. He'll be at Princeton, in my mind, for 3 to 5 years. Someone's going to pick him as head coach. Anthony Ashnault, to me, is going to be one heck of a head coach one day, because he knows how to build a program. He not single-handedly, but he was part of the rise at Rutgers Wrestling to bring it from new Big Ten program to Big Ten contender to winning. You can win a national title at Rutgers. You don't have to go to Penn State, Iowa, Michigan, Ohio State. You can go to Rutgers and win a national title. He proved that, laid the groundwork, and now he's probably going to do the same thing at Princeton. he'll do similar things at Princeton. And I think one day wherever he becomes a head coach, whenever it happens, I think Anthony Ashnall's going to be one heck of a head coach. He'll build a great staff, and he'll say, "Look what I did. Look what I helped out. Look what we built at multiple places." And he'll ultimately be, I think one of the best hires you could have in about 3 to 5 years' time.
Being a guy who's covered Rutgers for 10 years and you kind of know the pulse, you know the guys ins and outs, appreciate that take and kind of seeing what the temperature is with those guys leaving. That said, again, I'm going to dab your YouTube page again because you're giving out great content. You talk to a lot of different coaches. You've covered Gable coming back. You've covered AJ coming back. What are you most excited to follow this year and to cover this year? And is there anything that isn't getting dabs that you think people should be paying attention to?
Tough to say. I think the Gable Steveson and AJ Ferrari things are definitely the biggest newsworthy items. I know Ferrari's saga has been well documented for years at this point. He was a guy that I followed and covered in order to, in case he did come to Rutgers, because Rutgers was one of his finalists initially before he went to Oklahoma State. And, I know his whole family is obviously in the news when it comes to wrestling topics and how, basically how famous he is at this point. I like what he's about on the mat. Obviously, I'll leave the off the mat stuff for a different conversation, regardless of what you think about him, whether he's, what controversy follows him. We can be honest about that. Now, whether you love him or hate him, you're gonna watch, and I think that's the boat I'm in. Again, I like watching him because he brings eyeballs to the sport. So, regardless of what's happened in the past, we're in the present now. This is the situation where it is. He's at Cal State. He's going to be a national title contender. He's number one according to Intermat right now. Other outlets have him 1 or 2 or 3. He's going to be in the mix. I know he's been off the mat technically for 3 years without wrestling officially in college, but he's going to be in the mix. You're going to watch, love him or hate him. I can't say I'm in either boat. I'm going to watch him because I do want to watch him. I think it's great for the sport because you have a personality like him in the sport. And again, it's a little bit different from Gable, where I guess Gable Steveson was a heel when he first came in because he was one of the most hyped prospects at heavyweight you could ever see. He didn't lose, and then he only lost to Anthony Cassar twice his freshman year, and he hasn't lost since then. Olympic gold medalist, and he was very well respected along the college scene when he supposedly hung it up in 2022. Then he WWE stint, then he came back and was maybe going to go to the world team in 2023 and maybe make a run for the Olympics in 2024, but he was still with WWE. Then he went to the NFL rat for a brief moment this summer, and now he's back. Well, he did it within the rules. I'm fine with it. I know people aren't fine with it. It's totally fine to have that opinion because he's been out of college wrestling for about almost 3 years at this point, but I'm fine with it. I love Gable Steveson. I love watching him wrestle. Just again, it adds eyeballs to the sport. He's a big personality. So is AJ Ferrari. Those are guys you're going to watch whether you like him or you don't. So that's the boat I'm in. I'm going to watch him. I'm going to cover him. I don't have any bias against them or for him. I love watching them wrestle. I think that Gable Steveson is the favorite to win the national title this year at heavyweight. Yeah, I do. He hasn't wrestled collegiately in almost 3 years. He's still the Olympic gold medalist. He was still training. He got himself back into wrestling shape. We'll see how it happens. We'll see his debut this weekend. If he comes out swinging and he's dominant, I'm just gonna say I told you so. I think he's gonna win it all. Will AJ Ferrari win it all? I think he's certainly gonna be in contention. Other guys like Stephen Buchanan and obviously Jacob Cardenas from Iowa and Michigan, respectively, and of course, my guy John Poznanski, he's gonna be in the running as well. But yeah, I'm looking forward to watching those guys. As far as other storylines are concerned, I just think watch dual meets. I think you really got. I think I'm a big dual meet guy. I'm sure if you guys have watched my content, you know how much I love dual meets and how much college wrestling needs a dual meet championship. And I've gotten, I think at this point, 20 coaches on the record saying, yeah, we need it. So I'm still asking myself, what the heck is the holdup at this point? The EIWA recently announced they're doing some kind of like dual meet championships where they're going to split the conference into divisions. You'll have division matches, and then you'll be like the dual meet champion of like the Patriot division or the other division, the EIWA. So I think that's a nice little step in the right direction. I still think we need a team tournament, and we need to crown our team national champion that way. I think other media members share my sentiment. There are select few that don't, which is fine. I think they're wrong, but it's fine. This is America. You can have it. You can have an opinion. You can think whatever you want. But I think we do need that. So I think if you're going to look out for anything, I'm not going to give you anything specific. I'm just going to say go watch dual meets. If you support a team, go to their dual meets, pay for a ticket, or at least watch them. If you can't pay for a ticket and get there, watch them. Watch dual meets. Support the dual meet. I look at, I can rave about Rutgers all day because of what Coach Goodell has helped build in terms of a dual meet atmosphere. Again, top 5 in attendance every year at Jersey Mike's Arena. But I want to give a shout out because I did talk to him. I talked to Adam Hall, Utah Valley's new head coach, who was at NC State for a long time. Utah Valley, what they're doing, they had 5,000 people at that match. What was that, last week against Oklahoma State?
Yeah.
That, to me, if you build something like that at a program like that, where I'm not gonna say it's in the middle of nowhere, but that school is gonna be known as a wrestling school in the mainstream before too long, based on what he's doing. More guys need to do what he's doing. Follow the Coach Goodell map, I should say pattern, and follow what Adam Hall's doing. Because teams like Penn State, it's almost like clockwork for them at this point. Iowa, same thing. Oklahoma State, same thing. But go support those teams. If you're a fan of those teams, go buy a ticket. Go watch those matches. I think the biggest thing wrestling fans need to look out for this year is just watch dual meets. Watch how exciting dual meets can get, especially when you get two big teams. I know Missouri and Virginia Tech just wrestled the other day. Rutgers is going to Virginia Tech tomorrow, or they're already there, but they're going to wrestle them tomorrow. Add a conference matchups. Just watch Big Ten Network, watch Big Ten Plus, watch ESPN Plus for the ACC and the Ivy League stuff, or the EIWA stuff, or Big 12. Just watch dual meets. Watch dual meets. Go to dual meets. I can't stress that enough. So I would say, outside of the individuals that really made headlines over the last few weeks, that to me is what you got to do this year.
Right on. Yeah. Jason Bryan, his commentary was be a better fan.
Yeah, I agree. And I love Jason. I've talked to Jason many times. Him and I actually date back to when I was in college. I actually had him on one of my college radio shows to get his take on some wrestling stuff way back when. So I've actually known him for probably almost 10 years at this point too. But yeah, Jason's a great dude. But I echo that sentiment. If you want this sport to keep surviving and eventually thriving, especially in the uncertain era of NIL, the portal, and eventually the revenue sharing coming down next year, just be a better fan. Be a great fan. If you're a wrestling fan, turn casuals into wrestling fans. That to me is your mission. I don't care if they don't have to know the ins and outs of the sport. Get them to see the spectacle that is a wrestling match, a dual meet at any major institution. Support the D2s, support the D3s, support women's wrestling. I'm a big advocate for women's wrestling. See what Iowa's doing. I wish more Power 4 schools could do that. Again, it's tough with Title IX, the revenue sharing, so it might be on hold now at this point. But you see a wrestling dual meet, even at your high school, just go do it. Go watch. And I promise you'll come away, okay, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, no doubt. They mentioned the Utah Valley and the Oklahoma State match, and I heard Chris Pendleton talking about Tom Brands and reaching out to Chris and making sure that they went to Oregon State to kind of build up that. And I thought it was kind of cool because I feel like the Brands brothers maybe sometimes, and I might be guilty of this as well, is just kind of get on them about some of their got to work harder, got to get better, that could just like sentiment over and over. But I think it's cool that they're creating parity to promote the to promote the sport. Let's go to Oregon State to build up the program. Let's bring Cowboys to Utah Valley to build up the program. Let's bring in LIU and get them some eyes on them and supporting the program. So I really like the direction that things are headed, and it can hopefully only get better. More and more programs are being added. I personally, to grow wrestling, would love to see a Division I school in every state. I think we just got Tarleton State in Texas that just added a program.
Yeah, I think they're on their way, right? It's another year or two until they're D1 or something along those lines. Yeah. I think that's Grant Leaf down there, former Mizzou guy. I think he's still the head coach down there. It was a club. But yeah, Texas, prime opportunity. If Tarleton State's the first D1 program in Texas, well, I think more schools might follow. I'm not saying the SEC schools, but maybe the other Texas schools that are in the big, like a TCU, for example, or a Baylor. Not saying they're going to immediately add wrestling, but I think it's going to draw eyeballs, and you're like, okay, maybe we could do something with this.
Yeah. And the fact that now with women's wrestling, it takes the Title IX out of the equation where we're adding women's wrestling, we're adding men's wrestling. I would love to see, with the way the high school landscape is in Florida and Georgia.
Yeah.
I would like to see Division I programs there. And it's kind of a bummer, how well Kansas is at the high school level that they don't have a Division I program. I know, it's either KU or K-State might be difficult, but they're both in the Big 12, so that's kind of an easy transition to getting a team in there.
Yeah, for sure. And it kind of, and I'm probably with you on that, that it bums me out that they don't have schools, or I mean, I should say they don't have programs in those areas, because when I wrestled for the club team in college, again, we have a Division I program at Rutgers. So it's like, okay, yeah, naturally to have a club team, but then you go to the national tournament out in Allen, Texas, middle, nice little centralized location for this tournament. It's bigger than the NCAA's in terms of how many participants and how many
Mhm.
teams are involved than the NCAA Division I tournament, which is bonkers to me. You have 64-man brackets. Now, granted, all those weight classes are not always filled out to 64 guys, but you have 64-man brackets for these tournaments, which is mind-boggling to me. Now, granted, I never qualified for nationals. I got knocked out early in the conference tournament, but I did go to nationals as our club president, and of course later as a coach for 1 year to help out the following year after I was done competing and done with college. But I see that, I'm like, wait, the Florida Gators have a team? UCF, by the way, guys, if Central Florida, Big 12 school now. Gus Malzahn's the football head coach. I mean, they're not as good this year, but I'm like, UCF, they have a program. They were
Yeah.
too deep at every single weight class, because the NCAA, you're allowed to qualify 2 wrestlers per weight class. They were too deep at, I think, 10 out of 11 weight classes for that national tournament. And then and Liberty, they're a big group of 5 football program. They are a nationally recognized wrestling program that's not NCAA affiliated. They were too deep. They basically they almost swept every weight class the 1 year when I was down there. They almost had, I think, about 6 or 7 national champions. They were too deep at every weight. They had a couple guys wrestle each other in the national finals. So these programs are there, and you look at like Texas, the Longhorns. They have a big club program. USC, UCLA, all these big programs all over the country that are not affiliated with current Division I conferences in the NCAA. They have programs. They're just club teams. Now, some of them are fully student funded, like ours at Rutgers was, because again, we have a Division I program. But you look at some of the schools I just mentioned. Some of the schools have full fledged coaching staffs. They have
Yeah.
2 coaches. They have 2 coaches. Yeah, it's student run, but the school backs them. So what's the extra step? I know it's more money, but how many schools have more money than we ever know what to do with? So
Yeah.
to me, I don't know what the holdup is or what the answer is in terms of how to break through that brick wall. But there is potential, because there are programs there and there is interest there. I just don't know necessarily the exact next step that you need to take in order to say, okay, the SEC, for instance, is going to add wrestling to all 16 of its schools.
Yeah, I think University of Central Florida would be a quick and easy transition
It
because of
would,
how
yeah.
how big their programming is and how well they've done. And you look at Little Rock and shout out to
Right.
Coach Ersman and what they've done and how they've been able to. I mean, they didn't even have high school wrestling like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So I mean, like you said, the blueprint's there. You pick a coach that's doing it and you get it rocking and rolling. And I think it only makes things a lot better. And more programs equals more participation and more opportunities for kids.
Yeah, for sure. And Little Rock is one of the best stories, I think, in college wrestling, considering they got their first 2 All-Americans last year, and Stephen Little, Nasir Bailey. Only year 5 of that program. Neil Arisman's done a fantastic job. And obviously, both those guys are going to be in the national title conversation at those 2 weights. They have a not a much better lineup, I would say, off the top of my head, but I think they're a better and improved lineup this year. So they're going to be a problem for a lot of teams. And I talked to Coach Arisman right after NCAA's to get his reaction to those 2 All-Americans. I thought it was one of the best stories from the tournament in Kansas City. And I'm just like, yeah, that's a guy I would probably go wrestle for. Yeah, if I saw Coach Arisman in my living room, I would say, yeah, I think I want to go out in the middle of nowhere in Arkansas and go wrestle for you at this rising program, because they got money coming in, and they got good facilities. They got a great coaching staff, and they have a great program culture already. It's young, but they're gonna be an issue. They're gonna be an issue for a lot of teams, because they're gonna be really good.
And they got one of the best fundraisers in the sport, and it's for a good cause. So if you're down in Little Rock, go buy a ham for the holiday season.
I could eat, so if I was in the area, I would definitely do it.
Nick, it's interesting you say Coach Ersman is someone you would wrestle for, because Rich and I, when we got off the call with him, we said the same thing. And there's a lot of these coaches. We talked a lot about NAIA schools, even though I
Mhm.
can't pronounce it. And there's some coaches there that we talked to, like, wow, I would run for him. I'd wrestle for him. We talked to the Wolfburg head coach, track cross country, no, cross country, not track. And we said we'd run for him. So it's interesting, the schools that you might not know of might have programs that can change your life and help you not only on the course or on the mat, but help you in life too. So I love that you said that. We're running short on time. I got two things I want to ask if Rich doesn't have anything else for you before we get into the Final Four. You mentioned wrestling for the Rutgers club team, and you also mentioned you do jiu-jitsu. Did you happen to do jiu-jitsu at Rutgers by any chance?
No, I didn't, but it's funny you mentioned that because they would practice right before we did. And funny connection, one of my high school teammates, Al Bruce Twayev, he is actually my current coach. He was 2 years old. He was 2 years older than me. We wrestled together in high school. So I trained at his jiu-jitsu school, Harbor Jiu-Jitsu, down here in South Jersey. He transferred into Rutgers after 1 year. I believe he went to LaSalle. I believe is where he started out in college, and he played some rugby. And then he got back into wrestling with our club team. So that's kind of how me and him kind of reconnected. And then he discovered jiu-jitsu. So he was doing wrestling and jiu-jitsu at the Rutgers Jiu-Jitsu Club at the same time. Then he fully transitioned into jiu-jitsu. But at the time, that's when Gary Tonin was still coaching the Rutgers BJJ Club. And that's how he got introduced to guys like Gordon Ryan, Nicky Ryan at the time when they were all still one unit. But that's who Al Bruce, my coach and my friend, he still trains under Gary and under John Donaher and his teammates with Gordon and all those other guys as well. So that's how he got into it. I did jiu-jitsu a little bit when I was in high school. My dad's best friend actually got me into it a little bit. So I was doing that a little bit like, on the weekends, open mats with a gi. Didn't know what I was doing. I was just trying to wrestle. I didn't know what I was doing, but got back into it after I graduated. So a couple of years ago, I've been training now for over 4 years. I do have my blue belt. What is it? I think it was August of 2020. I hopped in there. I actually hopped in there. I think for a class with him with Al Bruce the year prior. So I got back into it like only like a year and change after college. As I wanted to get back on the mat a little bit. So I was like, let me go back into jiu-jitsu. Now I'm obsessed with it right now. So at the time, yeah, I was interacting with all the jiu-jitsu guys while we were practicing and training for wrestling. So it was a nice little crossover right there. And obviously, it probably egged me on to kind of get to jiu-jitsu now at this point where me being on the precipice of my purple belt. So I would say, yeah, that kind of definitely got me back into it for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned Gary. That's why I had
Yeah.
asked because we all know he's a stud from
Yeah, yeah.
Lacey, from Central Jersey.
Yep.
So that's why I asked. And at the beginning of the podcast, one last question I have for you. At the beginning of the podcast, you mentioned you've done interviews with Michael Irvin and Tim Tebow. Have you had moments doing interviews, calling matches that you've had to pinch yourself, or in the moment you had to realize, hey, I got to be professional right now. I got to stay focused and I got to interview this guy, or does it just come secondhand and it's just another person to you?
It's secondhand now. Don't get me wrong. Like leading up to it, I'm still just like, oh my God, I got, at this point, I've had Tebow on 3 times. So once when I was at 24/7, and then the last 2 times at On 3, and then Michael Irvin was an early one as well when I was still over at 24/7. So talking to guys like that, or even just talking like I talked to a couple of college football coaches as well, like guys like PJ Fleck, Jeff Monken, Kyle Whittingham, guys like that. You know, at the time, especially a couple of years ago, I was like, "Oh my God, like this is a big opportunity." And it's weird because you're not in person. If I was in person, I think I would oddly feel more nerves, but then be like, "Okay, this is easier in person because we're together." When you're remote and you're doing it over Zoom or StreamYard, you're like, "Oh my God, just make sure my internet's not working. I don't want my background to look embarrassing. I want to make sure I know what I'm doing because we're over at the computer and like the guy could like." Who knows? Like, who knows what they're going to think of me like over the course of a computer. So, I think the first time I interviewed Tebow, I had to pinch myself a little bit, and then the only other time I would say I had like an oh shoot moment was probably I'm trying to think now because again I haven't broadcasted too many gigantic events. I've broadcasted high school football state championship games. I've broadcasted. Um, big basketball games in high school, a lot of big high school stuff, some big college wrestling matches. But the last time I was in like a historic moment, it was when Ashnault and Suriano won the national titles for Rutgers. And I think there's a little extra juice, just because I was classmates with them, especially Ant, knowing him for so long. At that time, because that was 2019, That was the year after I left college. So I was already out of school for about a year. And then Matt, who I broadcast with now, since he's a year younger than me, he was the head guy for the wrestling coverage at WRSU, our student radio station. So I was covering the tournament anyway for a Rutgers blog back then. Went to Pittsburgh with him and this other kid Garrett, who was working with Matt at the time for the student radio station, and they made me a guest broadcaster for some of these matches on WRSU. So I think that was like the big, like, I had to pinch myself, like, this is actually going to happen. So I think like the first like whoa moment, and I kept it cool on the air for the most part. I mean, there is video of us going nuts in the booth, so I can't say I was totally unbiased for that one. But Soriano's win, because that was the first one, that was in sudden victory. It was a wild match, controversy, all that good stuff. Went nuts. I think when Ant won, it was a more controlling victory that I kind of settled in, but I think I felt a lot for that one just because, again, we knew each other for so long. We were students together. He knew I was covering his career as a student. I was talking to him in the wrestling room. I think I don't know if he ever remember. I don't even know if he remembers this, but at one time he was like looking for extra drilling one time after practice, and he came into our club practice where we had like 5 guys in there, and him and I drilled for about 30 seconds, and I was like, okay, drill with one of our better guys, because I'm not going to do you any good. So that was like a pinch me moment, and like maybe like an oh shoot moment. Like, this is historic right now in the confines of Rutgers athletics. So I don't think I've gotten anything like that since then, because I think I'm just so used to talking to larger figures in the sport of wrestling, with college football, big personalities. Like, again, not to, I'll brush this off my shoulder, but because I've talked to Tebow now multiple times, I'm just like, oh yeah, good, it's good to, it's good to talk to you again. It's pretty cool. So maybe if I saw him in person, we did like an in-person podcast or something like that, maybe I had to pinch myself. But because I watched him growing up, which is kind of weird to say, considering we're basically almost media colleagues, because he covers college football for ESPN. So it's a little weird from that aspect. But I think other than that, I think I'm pretty used to it at this point.
Nick, totally random. Last one for me. I mean, I could talk to you all night. I got a ton that I'd love to ask you, but totally random knowing that you're into the jiu-jitsu and you cover wrestling, maybe just specifically from the Rutgers program. But if there was one guy you would like to see go into MMA, who would it be?
Ooh, I would have said Nick Soriano at the time, but I don't think he's ever going to do that right now. Oh man. Well, I know. Well, I do know. I know Poznanski. Sam and I have talked about it. He's a purple belt in jiu-jitsu right now. So I don't think he's going to go in MMA. I think he's going to pursue jiu-jitsu like when he's done in totality with wrestling. So I would actually, personally, I would love to just roll with him and train with him. It's like we've joked around about it. I'm sure. I mean, again, I'm good. I'm much better at jiu-jitsu than I was at wrestling, but he would still crush me probably. So that'd be fun for him, I would say. But MMA, oh man. I almost want to say, I feel like Jackson Turley is an MMA guy for some reason. Jackson's just a wild dude. Now, he might totally disagree with me, especially if he listens to this or hears this. But to me, Jackson Turley, I feel like would be a wild man at MMA. I would love to see that. Other guys, maybe Dylan Shawver. But I think Shawver's he's a go getter. He's going to attack you. And the way he's been wrestling the past year and a half, especially after last year winning the Big Ten title and becoming an All American for the first time, I feel like those two guys for sure. Like, yeah, I could see you in the octagon. Definitely see you in the octagon.
All right, cool. I guess one more. Are you a gi guy or you do no gi?
No
No
gi all the
gi?
way. I do train in the gi a little bit. Don't worry, I do train in the gi a little bit. I show respect to the proper martial art. I actually did one of our gi classes the other night, so I was back in the gi the other night, but no gi. 'Cause I love keeping it similar to wrestling. I feel
Yeah.
like no gi is almost a little bit more dynamic because there's not collars to grab onto, and there's not, you're not choking guys with your clothes. Now, is gi a little bit more realistic if I got into a street altercation? Yeah, maybe so. But no gi to me, as far as like the grappling is concerned, when you're trying to use a better grappler, I feel like no gi is a better indication of that. That's just my opinion, though. I'm a big
Yeah,
no gi guy.
right on. Yeah, same
You're
over
in,
here.
yeah, you're in the circle of trust. I'm probably gonna offend some people right now, but I feel like gi is the equalizer for guys who aren't as athletic, and or like dads in their 40s or 50s, they can kind of hang where once you take that gi off, the athletics come out and you don't have anything to hold on to. And I'm not gonna lie, back when I was a young chap, I might have got gi choked by like a 60-year-old guy, so I still might be
So
sour
a little
on that.
salty about it. It's all
Yeah, for
good.
sure.
It's all good. We
For
still have the
sure.
no-gi guys that love the leg locks though, and I've gotten a lot more into leg locks over the last year. I've kind of developed that part of my game a little bit. So I can't say I still don't pull guard, but I will utilize leg locks a little bit now. So have to diversify for sure.
Well, yeah, and I also think pulling guard gets a bad rap because if you do it right, it's almost like a takedown. You can take someone down and sweep them right away from, just pulling on their leg and pulling guard. But was kind of like a funky wrestler, so that kind of
Yeah.
worked more for my style. But I know there's a lot of wrestlers, and me too, when dudes would just drop to their butt or try to just get leg locks. It's like, so yeah, I see both sides of it.
Yeah, I see it
So
now too. I've gotten out of like the wrestle only mode, but that's my primary go tos on the feet, and I'll take you down, and we'll go from there.
yeah, I feel you on that. So, first Final Four I have for you tonight. Are you a coffee drinker?
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah. I think I had 2 cups today already. It's actually a little bit rare now if I go 3, but yeah, coffee guy. Black coffee though, nothing in it, just straight black coffee. Just give me the diesel fuel and we're off and rolling.
All right. How do you brew it? Just normal Mr. Coffee, something like that?
I do have a Keurig, so throw a little cake up in there, but nothing. I have nothing against making it. Throwing the coffee grounds into a filter and doing it that way as well. But yeah, straight black coffee. Whether it's at home, I go to a Wawa or a Quick Check, whatever the case may be. Black only. Give me a dark roast, and we're all good.
Awesome.
Nice. Nick, do you have any daily practices or rituals that you do on a regular basis to show up as the strongest version of yourself?
I think I just got to remind myself that I'm doing a career that I think a lot of people either envy or wish they could do. The fact that I have to remind myself, I do take myself pretty seriously, and I try to remind myself to not do that. So I think just that daily reminder of like, hey, you work out of your home studio, you cover college sports for 8 hours a day, you get to go broadcast pretty cool things, and the bulk of your frustration is if the Wi-Fi or the television isn't working as far as your work is concerned, or editors are a little bit slow with their corrections. That's pretty much it. So I think it's the daily reminder to not take yourself too seriously and to remind yourself that you could be doing something that's a lot more taxing on your brain and your body for a living. So I would consider myself pretty lucky in that regard.
And are you a guy that has like multiple monitors and got like
So I u-
feature
so
in
I used
picture?
to. I used to. Now it might change because my wife and I did just buy a house. So when we do move in, and I redo my home studio, and that might change. But right now I have a big Mac desktop. That's all I really need right now. I used to have my laptop and a second screen, but just the Mac desktop and the television right in front of me as well. So maybe in the new home studio, maybe a second monitor, a second television, if if I don't get yelled at first. But we'll see what happens.
Right on.
Nick, I do the same thing. I try to remind myself daily that I'm living a blessed life, and sometimes, oh, big deal. I gotta do a podcast from Costa Rica, and I don't have my
I
mic.
know.
But
Yeah,
You gotta go to the
I'm with you.
airport.
Oh, I have to record this. Actually, I got this is why my wife keeps me in check. I was just like, well, I got to record this tonight. I can't train the second class. And she's like, well, you schedule that yourself. I said, yeah, all right, you're right. I brought it on myself. You're right. No, you're right. You're right. So again, she's right. So that's what I did. That's what I do. So again, reminding myself that you do this to yourself, but enjoy it. So I do. I generally enjoy it, but I got to remind myself, like, look, you're doing this. It's really not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. Like, enjoy it. If people love it, that's even better.
Well, we appreciate you taking a night off of jujitsu for the Airy Bros. I know how that jujitsu grind gets and how hard it is to miss a class, so we appreciate that. And
Of course, guys, I
tell your
really appreciate it.
professor we said thank
How
you.
often
So,
are you doing doubles?
I'm in there. I would say anywhere between 3 to 4 times a week. So, like on an average Monday, I'll help him teach the kids class for 45 minutes. Then no gi class is an hour. Our MMA fundamentals class is another 45 minutes, and then most times I'll stay for open mat, get some rolls in for about a half hour or so. So I mean I'm there from about 5 o'clock to about 8:30. So we're talking like 3.5 to 4 hour training sessions.
You put in some marathons.
Yeah, on the long days for sure. But then, I try, I try not, I've kind of switched now where I don't lift and do jujitsu the same day on the same days now. I used to do that. Some days, like longer days, like a Thursday or Friday where I'm not working for On3, I'm off on those days. Might lift earlier in the day, then go train. If not, it depends on the body feels. But I try to, do jujitsu 3 to 4 times a week and make sure I get my lifts in 3 to 4 times a week as well.
Right on. Respect.
I try.
Getting those double gains in, jumping levels. Awesome. Nick, what are you listening to right now? Music, podcasts, audiobooks? Are you reading anything?
A lot of podcasts. I'll give credit to the internet guys, Justin Bash and Willie Sale. I listen to them for a lot of their wrestling content to kind of help fuel my own, not to steal their ideas, obviously, but to kind of like so I don't listen to myself constantly. So I do listen to those guys. I'm a big part of my take guy on Barstool, so that's like my replacement from the day to day of like listening and watching ESPN all day and watching my brain rot. So at least that's fun to listen to. I'm still a Howard Stern guy. Listen to him when I can. I obviously fall behind on the episodes. And then as far as reading is concerned, I actually look at my bookshelf right now. I read a couple books. I read a Philadelphia Eagles book that was chronicling the last 25 years. I actually recently read the Aaron Rodgers biography by Ian O'Connor, who's a very accomplished author. He wrote the Bill Belichick biography as well. I actually had him on for a podcast for On3 talking to Ian, which was fantastic. I'm a big Aaron Rodgers guy. I'm a big Aaron Rodgers fan. I love listening to him and watching him and just like the headlines almost, I would say, that he generates. But I'm fascinated by him as the player and the man. So that biography was great too. So that's what I've read recently.
All right. Appreciate that.
What do you listen to when you lift?
Almost anything actually. Nothing. I'm a big classic rock guy. So some days if I really have to go nuts, I'll throw the Metallica on, throw the Disturbed on. If I have to get big lifts in there, like my deadlifts or a big bench or a squat. Other than that, I have like over 1,000 songs on my phone, so I'll shuffle. So it could be Bruce Springsteen, it could be Elvis Presley, it could be Johnny Cash, it could be Chili Pepper. I'm a big Chili Peppers fan. Foo Fighters. It could be just some wacky house music for all I know. So I'm a big shuffle guy. Because I do work out in my garage. Got a nice little setup. So it's my little zen zone.
Heck yeah. Do a little fist pump. That's the
That's
jersey
right.
coming out.
Gotta do it. Gotta do it. I think it's required down here.
You ever been to a pool party down in AC?
No, I have not. I stay away from that. AC to me is maybe a bit overrated in terms of the. I'll go to the casinos. Don't I don't really gamble, but I'll go to the casinos. Nice dinner with the wife, or sometimes go out drinking in AC. But it's pretty much more of a homebody. So the local dive bar down the street is good enough for me.
Right on. Last one we got for you, Nick. Could be food. We talked a little bit. You got 1,000 songs on shuffle. Maybe you're a closet Swiftie. Do you have a do you have a guilty pleasure?
Guilty pleasure. Oh man. I don't know. Well, I can't call myself a Swiftie. My wife's the big Swiftie. I can't call myself that. Respect her music. She's got some good songs. She got some bangers. Don't get me wrong. Guilty pleasure though. That's interesting. Oh, actually, it's funny because she can overhear what I'm doing right now, and she actually reminded me, and I wouldn't have thought of this without her. So another credit to my wife, Chelsea. So she's a baker on the side, and when she's decorating cakes and these big elaborate cakes with a lot of decorating, a lot of icing, there's scraps in a bowl. Like she cuts off parts of the cake, so it's a big bowl of scraps. It's already baked, it's just plain cake. That's my guilty pleasure. If I see that, I'm just like, so I'll start taking pieces, piece by piece, start eating it when I really shouldn't. And then at a certain point, I'm like, I've eaten too much of this, and I tell her, please, just throw that in the trash right now. I won't go after it. Just throw it in the trash before I eat the whole bowl of scraps.
No, not picking out of the garbage like Costanza with the eclair.
No, I can't do that. At least for Costanza, the eclair was on top of the garbage. It was on top of a wrapper, on top of the garbage. These scraps go to the bottom, and then leftover dinner is thrown out there too. So, or whatever else is in the trash, it's on top of the scraps. Make sure I don't go after it.
Okay, solid.
Nick, thank you so much for your time tonight. Keep on the great coverage with On3 Sports and your YouTube channel. You are crushing it, and those post-match kind of recaps, keep them coming. I'll listen to them as long as they're there. So thank you so much for that.
I appreciate you guys. Really appreciate you having me on. You guys are doing great work. I've seen your social media, and obviously your podcast, and the guys you're pulling in as well. So I think you're great for elevating the sport of wrestling. And obviously, you guys mentioned cross country and track and field as well. So keep doing what you're doing as well. And again, have me back anytime.
Absolutely, Nick. We'll have you back on to reconnect either middle of the season or maybe after Rutgers gets another national champ. We can celebrate and have another conversation to help promote the sport. So we appreciate you joining us tonight. And for all of you that are joining us, we thank you and we appreciate you. And we will be back next week and we're going to be hitting the cross country course again. So